Kate Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. It should be, if I do this right, it should be March 4th. And March 4th is the anniversary of the placing into the cabinet of the president, the first female cabinet secretary. And her name was Frances Perkins. She became the Secretary of Labor throughout the New Deal. She was instrumental in many of the programs of the New Deal. She had a remarkable life, and I'd like to tell you about her. Also, I read cards about her that will be in the membership if you're interested. But let's start with this woman who was an indefatigable champion of Social Security, immigration reform, due process, labor rights, women and children. She was a remarkable individual. So she was born April 10th, 1880 in Boston. Her first name was Fanny. It wasn't Frances. She changed it later. Her parents were stationers. Now there's a job that kind of almost doesn't exist anymore, a stationer's shop, like the Hallmark store, right? She had one sister. Her family had roots in colonial America. She's from Boston, so you can imagine. All of the women in her family up to her had been educators. She loved Greek literature. And, that's a slog. And to love it as a teenager is indicative of the level of your intelligence. It took me 70 years to even get to that point. So she loved Greek literature she went to a classical high school in, I believe it's called Worcester in Massachusetts. In 1902, she went to Mount Holyoke and graduated with a bachelor's in, get this, chemistry and physics. Really difficult. She was class president. She was very into progressive politics, and she was a suffragist. She was strongly influenced by her teacher. Her teacher's name was Anna. I'm not sure how to say this. Sociel, I think. She took the class at one point, excuse me, on the tour of a factory to study working conditions. And Frances was horrified, really impressed her and led her on her path. After she got her bachelor's, she taught chemistry at an all-girls school in Chicago, and she volunteered at Hull House. Now, this was Jane Addams' house, where Jane Addams was a social worker and a suffragist. This was a series of buildings. It wasn't just a house. It was like an organization that did settlement houses. Now, this was to serve recent immigrants. At one point, they ended up with 13 buildings. People would come to this country, many of them not speaking English, really poor, really needing help. And Jane Addams, as a social worker, saw the need for this and established this service to help new immigrants. Frances worked there as a young woman. In 1905, she converted and became an Episcopalian, and that's when she changed her name to Frances. I guess there was no St. Fanny. In 1907, she went to Wharton Business School for Economics. While working as a social worker in Philadelphia, she joined the Socialist Party, but she left 2 years later because they weren't realistic enough for her. She felt they were too idealistic, too much caught up in theorizing and not enough practicality. She went to Greenwich Village, New York, and attended Columbia. In 1910, she got her master's in economics and in social work, and she became active in the suffrage movement. In 1910, in New York State, she was known for her work as an advocate for better housing conditions, as in her job as the head of the New York National Consumers League. She taught sociology at Adelphi College. In 1912, she got the work week in New York changed for women and children, lowered to 54 hours a week for children. In 1913, and this is really sad, she witnessed the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. And if you're not familiar with that, I probably should do a video on it. 146 young girls died. They were trapped. The doors were locked. It was a multi-story building. They couldn't get out. Dealing with fabric, sewing, there's a lot of lint, and the lint was what caught fire. So because of the fire, she left her job, and she got a recommendation from Teddy Roosevelt and was made executive secretary for the Committee on the Safety of the City of New York to improve fire safety. In 1913, she investigated another fire, which was almost as well known, at the Freeman plant in Binghamton, New York, which killed 63 young women. She worked with FDR on legislation to improve the safety and conditions for New York workers. So she's still on a state level. In 1913, she married an economist, Paul Wilson, and she actually went to court and defended her right to keep her own name, which, seriously? In 1916, they had a daughter, Susanna, and her husband's mental health began to deteriorate. This is very sad. It sounds very much, her daughter was later diagnosed with manic depression, is what they called it. So we're talking bipolar disorder. And it sounds like this is probably what was going on with her husband. In 1918, he started a long history of being in and out of mental hospitals. She was often left to raise their daughter alone while he was hospitalized, and she went on to share housing over several decades with a number of different female friends as the years progressed. She worked in the New York State government and had, as they put it then, she had a very high rank for a woman. She organized factories, their inspections. She settled strikes. She became one of the U.S.'s leading experts on labor relations. She was supported in the important roles she took on. Like, the path was cleared for her to get things done by Governor Al Smith and by FDR. They heard a lot of complaints about her being too radical, and she's a woman, in case they didn't notice, And these two men valued her for her abilities and defended her absolute qualifications for the job she did. She was one of the first female commissioners of New York, and she got the pay for women increased in New York State. In 1929, FDR appointed her the State Industrial Commissioner with a job overseeing 1,800 employees. She helped put New York in the front of progressive reform, so harbinger of things to come. She reduced the work week to 48 hours for women. She championed a minimum wage and also unemployment insurance. She tried to end child labor and to ensure work safety. And in 1933, FDR nominated her as Secretary of Labor. And they met and had a lengthy discussion. And she told him, well, this is the stuff that I want. And you have to not stand in my way, because I think these are crucial things that will improve this country. And remember, we're at the heart of the Depression then. And some of her plans included a Social Security system and creating a minimum wage. And he said, go for it. And she got a lot of support from the National League of Women's Voters, but not from the American Federation of Labor, because she was a woman. So for 12 years, she was the Secretary of Labor, the longest Secretary of Labor, and the fourth longest cabinet member ever. She was the first woman cabinet member, therefore the first woman in the presidential line of succession. FDR supported her all the way. He was fully behind her, supported her goals. She was the central architect of the New Deal. She's the one who pushed and pushed and pushed. She played a major role helping create the civilian conservation Corps, and in 1935 was fully responsible for getting the Social Security Act passed, a landmark moment. She created the Immigration and Naturalization Service, and tried to implement liberal immigration policies. She fought against the prejudicial, racist, exclusionary rules. She got a lot of congressional pushback. She wanted to humanize the treatment of immigrants. She was successful against some very restrictive policies, including what was called the Bureau of Immigration Section 24 Squad, which was illegal apprehension tactics, which violated due process. In 1938, she went to Geneva to support U.S. involvement in the International Labor Organization, which was working towards world economic recovery because this is 1938. The Depression had been worldwide. In 1939, she refused to deport the head of the West Coast International Longshore and Warehouse Union guy, Harry Bridges, because he was a communist, and the government said, oh, well, let's deport him. He was opposed by some members of Congress, but later she advocated for him, refused to deport him, and later he was vindicated by the Supreme Court. So after Roosevelt died, Truman, this is April of 1945, Truman replaced the cabinet. That's usually what happens. He asked her, though, to serve on the U.S. Civil Service Commission, and in that role, she spoke out against government officials, this is unbelievable, requiring secretaries and stenographers to be physically attractive. No comment. In 1952, she left, her husband died, and she left her job and wrote her memoir, The Roosevelt I Knew. She returned to university teaching. She taught at Cornell, at the New York State of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell for the rest of her life. She was one of the first women accepted into the renowned intellectual community of Cornell. I guess it was like a club. I'm not entirely sure. She was a guest lecturer at the University of Illinois for a while in 1955 and in 1958. She died in 1965 at the age of 85 and was buried in Newcastle, Maine. So her legacy is really remarkable. First woman cabinet member, first woman in the presidential line of succession. She started Social Security. She started unemployment insurance. She fought for a federal minimum wage. She improved federal laws against child labor. She fought for the rights of immigrants. She facilitated specifically the immigration of thousands of Jews escaping the Nazis, including hundreds of children, despite U.S. anti-Semitism and restrictive immigration quotas. In 1982, she was entered into the National Women's Hall of Fame. In 2015, she was made an official icon of the LGBTQ History Month, and I think that lets the cat out of the bag. We did mention that she lived with a series of female roommates after her husband had to be hospitalized, and that continued the rest of her life. In 2019, she went into the Government Hall of Fame. Elizabeth Warren used a podium made from Perkins' homestead wood. So the homestead eventually, I guess, disintegrated, and a podium was made from wood salvaged from it. Elizabeth Warren used that in her honor. Time magazine did a series of covers. They did 89 covers to celebrate the women of the year, like each year for 89 years. She was 1933. Holyoke College has Frances Perkins program. This is a Bachelor of Arts degree for women 24 years old or older. The average age of going to college, I suppose, is about 18. About 140 Frances Perkins scholars go through Holyoke every year. She had a powerful impact on women's history in the United States by assuming powerful roles in the government. She fought hard for every job she had and for every program she championed. She was kind of cool and aloof. She wasn't all, touchy-feely. Except once during the United Auto Workers strike, she called the chairman of General Motors late at night, called him in the middle of the night and called him a scoundrel and a skunk. And this is a quote: "You don't deserve to be counted among decent men. You'll go to hell when you die." She told him. In 1980, Carter named the headquarters of the Labor Department the Frances Perkins Building. Her home in D.C., when she was, cabinet secretary, and her home in Maine, they both became National Historical Landmarks. In 2024, Biden named her homestead in Maine a national monument. In 2011, a mural, this is typical, a mural of her on the wall of the Maine Department of Labor's headquarters was removed by the Republican governor, but it was rescued and it's now in the Maine State Museum. The Episcopal Church created a feast day in her honor, the 13th of May. So in Annie, the musical Annie, she's mentioned. There's a scene where a couple of people from the government come to, FDR has Annie come, and there's a couple of people from the government hangers-on, in the room. And she's one of them who's told by FDR to sing along with the song Tomorrow. In Dirty Dancing, the girl, Joel Gray's daughter, plays a girl named Baby, but that's her nickname. Her real name is Frances, and at some point they say she was named after Frances Perkins, Secretary of Labor. And then there's a book, Becoming Madam Secretary by Stephanie Dray. And it's actually a novel, but it's a novel of her life. So that's the remarkable Frances Perkins. I hope you'll look her up and read up some more about her. Today is the day in honor of her becoming the first female cabinet member, Secretary of Labor. And it feels really nice to be able to say something positive about a cabinet member. Thank you very much for watching. Slán go fóill. Slánte.